set up for recording, so just stand by. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. It's not currently recording.
And Chelsea, we're going to go live with Facebook, and you might want to share that as well.
Yep, I'll let you know when we're live. Even I hear your cuckoo clock.
Even in, when you're going virtual, even that, when everybody pushes record, everybody gets quiet.
Yeah. One moment.
Because once somebody hits record, means whatever you say is out there perpetually.
Yes.
If somebody can chop it up and re-edit it and turn you into saying whatever they want you to say.
Yes.
Fakes, Chad, deep fakes. That's what we're working
on. Deep fakes, yeah.
We do at the Venture Center. It's all about deep fakes. Actually, I'm Mimi and Mimi is me, but you don't know that.
And I'm Wayne. All right, Mimi, I've left you in charge of our waiting room. So if you can let folks in, I'm about to push us live on Facebook. And
it's my favorite thing to do.
Yes, stand guard, screen the door. Okay, let me share my screen and we're going to go ahead and jump into it. Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for being with us on this Friday. Excited to have everyone with us for the first Lift the Rock of 2021. For those that are new or unfamiliar with this program, Lift the Rock focuses on topics as far as economic development, workforce development, and entrepreneurship. And so today we're going to talk about the value of water in economic growth. So a little bit more on that economic development side. And so with that, before we jump into who's on the panel and our moderator for today, I want to talk a little bit about the Venture Center. My name is Ashley Jones. I'm the Managing Director of Community Programs. And the Venture Center is a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been around for roughly 7 years, located in downtown Little Rock. And our whole mission is to support entrepreneurship and workforce development. And we do that through these 3 pillars: educate, collaborate, and accelerate. So this is a nice graphic that showcases a majority of the programs that we offer. There's a couple that we haven't added to the list, but on any given day, you can expect to see some of these programs. So today we have Lift the Rock. Next week, we've got a few workshops set up. Pitch and Pine is later on in the year. Spark is a local pre-accelerator that promotes local business growth. And so all of these programs are free, open to the public. And while we support community efforts, we also run 2 financial technology accelerators. And so that's that accelerate column. We've actually got the ICBA Think Tech Accelerator going on now. It kicked off about 2 weeks ago. And so we're excited to be hosting those 10 companies in this program. And the FIS Accelerator will kick off in the summer. So with community programs, we couldn't do this without our awesome sponsors. So I'd like to take a moment to thank them. Little Rock Regional Chamber, Simmons Bank, Entergy, Wright Lindsay Jennings, Frost, and our newest sponsor, Central Arkansas Water. So thanks to everyone for supporting our efforts and all of our community programs. We're excited to have you on board and part of this. A couple of programs that we have coming up that I wanted to bring your awareness to is a workshop on hardware. So we're going to have Torrance Liu, who's the co-owner and director of Spanner, and also Scott Zinker. You guys might recognize the brand Harry's, the razor subscription service. So they're going to be here to talk about the hardware space, and anybody interested in that industry or looking to get into it or learn a little bit more should attend this workshop on the 22nd. So next week, and it's from noon to 1. We also have a lunch and learn coming up on the 26th. And this is going to focus on the Archangel Alliance. This is a new alliance focused on small businesses looking for funding, but they also encourage angel investors to join and learn how all that works. So this is going to be a deep dive into Archangel Alliance to learn more about their network, how to get involved. And so that will be on the 26th, also at noon. And then this is one of the new series that we've kicked off that wasn't in that first graphic that I showed, VC Health. And so this is going to focus, this is a monthly series that we're kicking off at the end of this month. So January 29th, noon to 1. And so we're going to have Bruce Trimble with Bridgeway and also Brian Mears with Alleviant Health Centers. And this is going to focus on mental health and entrepreneurship. We want to create a community for entrepreneurs to join, destigmatize this talk about mental health, and really create an atmosphere where we can be open and honest about our mental health. So this again kicks off January 29th. Excited to continue this series every month and grow that community of folks to talk about this very, very important topic. And one final that I want to throw out there is early February, so January 5th from noon to 1. We've got an additional PPP update. So we had Edward Haddock on this past Tuesday to talk about some of the PPP updates. This next one's going to be a panel of SBA, CPAs, bankers, lenders, that sort of thing, to answer any and all of your questions about PPP loans and grants forgiveness, how to do your taxes with all of this information. And so be sure to register for that as well. All of those community programs that I just went through can be found on our website, our Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all you have to do is register, sign up, it's free, and you can join the conversation there. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to today's moderator, Doug Shackelford, who's the Communications Director at Central Arkansas Water, and he will moderate this discussion between our panelists today. Doug?
All right. Well, good afternoon now, everyone. It's great to see you on the call today. We appreciate you being here. We're really excited to have this opportunity here at CAW to discuss water and economic development. It really is an important topic that doesn't get discussed maybe as often as it should, because water is obviously incredibly important to the development of any community, and that's really what we want to dive into today. So what I'm going to do to start us off, before I introduce our panelists, is that we were able to have a little interview with our local chambers of commerce, and we produced a little video. In this video, we'll have Jay Chesshir, who's the president of the Little Rock Regional Chamber, and John Owens, who is the president of the North Little Rock Chamber of Commerce, talking a little bit about how they see water as an economic development tool. So I'm going to try to share my screen now. And there. Okay, and hopefully you guys all see a black screen that says the value of water. Is that what you're seeing? All right, here we go. We're going to give it a shot.
Water's the lifeblood for anything that we're going to do, are doing, or can do. Without the ability to grow, without the ability to take care of the people that are needed for that growth, and then obviously those that we're trying to attract to create more growth, water is literally essential to everything that we do.
Well, water is important for a number of reasons, but one reason is that we work to create a sense of place. We want people, visitors, and also our residents to remember that we have these beautiful trails and we have these great restaurants and we have all this natural beauty, but we also want them to know that we have great tasting water.
When we're working to locate a new industry and we're competing against communities and regions across the country and across the world, water is always one of those things that we discuss because of CAW's ability to not only create an abundance of water for today, the quality of that water for today, but also the capacity of growth for decades to come. Those things are important to companies, not only if they use water in their process, but because they recognize without people, without talented people, they can't grow, and without water, they don't get either one.
Well, water is very important for anyone that produces a product. Let's take food manufacturers, for example. Whether it's Diamond Bear, it's an ingredient in their beer, or someone like Tyson's who's making breaded chicken products, it's an ingredient there, or the waffle bakers. Even if they're not using water as an ingredient in their product, it's used to wash down equipment, and it's also used as a cooling agent in their boilers. And if water has impurities, it'll cause their equipment to not be as efficient, and it will increase the wear and tear and won't last as long.
When you look at regionalism and the ability to bring more people to the table in providing a service to them, but having them help in terms of different sources for that water and also treatment opportunities for that water, you put all of those things together and you have one entity doing that for a larger group. We have the ability not only for the economy of scale, but also to be able to plan further into the future because you have the resources to do it. If we're constrained by political boundaries within specific communities or specific counties, then we don't often have the opportunity to take that forward look and look 40, 50, 60, 70 years down the road as opposed to 4 or 6 years.
One of the things is that economic development is regional. When a manufacturer decides they're going to come to our community, the number one thing that influences where they're going to locate is probably going to be the site. So if a site, if you're providing water throughout the community, throughout Central Arkansas, then it's not going to matter where in our community they decide to locate, they're going to be able to get Central Arkansas water.
In the competitive world of economic development, we're always looking for a way to differentiate ourselves from the competition. And water is one of those primary areas that we have in which we can differentiate ourselves, not only with the quality of the water, the abundance of the water, the capacity for future growth, but the ability to use it in so many ways, either from a process perspective or a drinking perspective or a recreation perspective. We have all of that because of the amazing work that CAW has done with our water resources here in Central Arkansas. That's why we differentiate ourselves so well from so many others.
We definitely sell water as being an asset, and it's certainly an arrow in our quiver. One of the reasons is that economic development is regional. We work with site consultants who come into our marketplace and look for sites for potential clients. And when they do FAM tours and they come here, we always talk about the quality of our water as one of the assets we have in our community.
When you look at the history of how CAW was formed and you look at the leaders who came together, understanding that the way that we were going to be better together was to truly be together from a water resource standpoint, giving us the capacity for that growth. You know, all too often, communities are constrained by their inability to be able to provide more that then attracts more. And yet CAW, its leadership, both from a staff standpoint and the board's perspective, have literally navigated an amazing part of our history and have set us up for what truly is going to be an even better storied history going forward.
I think the most important things Central Arkansas Water can do to serve the community is, number one, keep the source pure. I think that that's a really important thing that you can do. Number two, I think, is keep the infrastructure current and maintained so that we have a good infrastructure for all of our water. And lastly, I think it's important when we do expand our economic footprint that you work with us to help us get water to the industrial sites that we're creating to attract new businesses here.
Okay. Hope that worked well for everyone. We actually put that video out on YouTube as well, on our CAW YouTube page. So if it didn't work for you and you'd like to go out and take a look, please, by all means, go out and check it out. We really appreciate John and Jay taking the time to do that for us, but also we appreciate their commitment to our community and to Central Arkansas Water. What I'd like to do now is introduce our panelists for the day. Sylvia Blaine is the Executive Director of the Arkansas Brewers Guild. They advocate for craft brewers across the state of Arkansas. Melissa Elliott is the President of the largest organization of water supply professionals in the world, the American Water Works Association. And in her spare time, she's also the Vice President of Communications and Marketing for Raftellus, which is a consulting firm focused on the public sector. And then Tad Bohannon, our CEO here at Central Arkansas Water. He oversees the largest water utility in the state of Arkansas, serving about 500,000 customers in 8 counties here in the central part of the state. So we appreciate all of you being on our call today to talk a little bit about water and economic development. So what I'm going to do is just throw out some questions, and I'll call your name and you can start the answer. But if either of our panelists would like to chime in on any question, feel free to do so. Also, of course, we have the chat feature here on Zoom. So if you as a guest today have a particular question or comment or topic that you would like to hear about, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll do what we can do, time permitting, so we can try to get everyone out of here by 1 o'clock. All right, so I'm going to start with you, Sylvia. And I really want to know, you're talking about a business, and obviously our brewers here utilize water every day as part of their product. How can it be an economic development tool for recruiting a new business into Central Arkansas?
Well, I think in your video, you covered it pretty well. The infrastructure and reliability are two of the most important things that our brewers are looking for when it comes to water, and of course, water quality. In Central Arkansas, the water quality is the water's pristine, and we're very lucky. I spoke to several breweries in Northwest Arkansas, and some in our rural areas that they're concerned with water is whether or where to place their business was whether or not they could have access to their municipal water source. So it is a key component. It's more than 90%, 95%, I think, or more as far as an ingredient in our product. So it is one of the number one concerns for our breweries.
Absolutely, yes. And Tad, I'll kind of lean into you now. As it relates to that and the business perspective that Sylvia just gave, how do you sell CAW? The CEO of this large water utility. A lot of people believe or have thoughts about how water utilities work and don't realize that there's a whole lot more to the process of water and to making sure water is available to everyone. So how do you sell potential businesses looking to move here?
Sure. It does boil back on things that have already been mentioned, and one of them is water quality. And it's actually, water quality becomes an issue that I really didn't even understand until I started talking with businesses about it. And whatever treatment they have to do post our treatment is a cost. And so the better our water is in our distribution system, the less secondary treatment, or in many instances, zero secondary treatment, do the businesses have to do because our water quality is so high, it actually lowers their cost of doing business. So just like anything else. The other thing is that given the amount of our supply, the location of it, in that it's not very far away, our largest source has to be pumped, but Lake Winona, which is our oldest water source, is totally gravity feed. It gravity feeds from the source to the plant, from the plant into the distribution system. So for instance, electricity is not a cost, which enables us to be able to keep our water rates low. And therefore it becomes, again, a lower cost factor as different enterprises are looking at it. And then the last one is supply. The worst thing any business wants is to set up a business and be rocking along and making progress and expanding their business's opportunities, and then they come up with a supply hurdle. And we've seen this in other communities, and believe me, we take advantage of that when we're talking with business prospects to say, due to the amount of water we have available, there's not supply restrictions. We don't have to ration water. We don't have, sorry, you're not going to be able to expand and put another line on your plant because we can't supply you with enough water. Given the quantity of water that we have available, that is a big factor for businesses, is that as they grow, they know that water is not going to be a constraining part of their thing. And then the last one would be reliability. And that is, there's nothing worse than you have an infrastructure failure and the business has to shut down and say, sorry, workers, everybody go home. We don't have water today, so we can't do anything. And that becomes making sure that our infrastructure remains up to par as far as operational, and that we have the built-in redundancies to be able to, when something does happen, that we can still provide water to the communities we serve and the businesses that we serve.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. You know, it's interesting because there are thousands and thousands of water utilities across the country, and they all have their own unique challenges, but also their unique opportunities. And that's why it's so wonderful to have Melissa on with us today, because as the president of AWWA, she works so closely with so many of these utilities around the country. And so let me start the first question to you, Melissa. When you think about economic development and some of the utilities you've worked with, either with Raftellus or in your time with AWWA, or your experience prior to Raftellus when you were working directly in the water industry, where have you seen success stories as it relates to economic development and water?
Well, thanks, Doug. Tad hit a lot of this, but I want to go back to that video where we heard a lot about regionalization. And you mentioned there's thousands of utilities in the United States. There's actually over 50,000 utilities in the US. And, just one example of local control, right? We love that in the United States. We love local control. We're not going to get away from that. But we're seeing utilities realize that there's a lot of efficiencies to be had when they share services, when they combine. For a lot of communities, the utility is by far the biggest asset that community has. And when you see communities similar to the one I'm in, and by the way, I'm out here in Denver, Colorado, metropolitan Denver, and there's a community just next to me, city of 100,000 people. There are 17 water providers for 100,000 people. Now that's a little bit crazy and confusing, and I'm sure there was lots of reasons why it was done that way. But what we're seeing is utilities say, hey, let's combine here, right? We had a lot of business leaders up here on Zoom listening in. You're all about efficiency. You're all about providing value to the consumer, right? And utilities, our public utilities, are really starting to realize that. And here's why. Water rates keep going up and up. It's really expensive to do what we do in our industry. I mentioned it's the biggest asset in these communities. And if you're so small that you can't afford that, or you're backing off on those rates, your infrastructure is then not being invested in and kept current. And so that's where I think we really do see the value of utilities being able to combine their resources moving forward in this regional approach that economic development has been doing for a couple decades now.
Absolutely. Those are all really strong points to make, specifically as it relates to regionalism. And so, Sylvia, I'm going to turn back over to you really quickly. You have brewers all across Arkansas. Some brewers choose to move one place, some brewers maybe choose to move a different place. A lot of that's going to be based on water supply. So, tell me a little bit about why maybe a brewer would want to consider moving from one place to another just based on the water supply and the water that's made available to them.
Well, the water source is really important to many of our brewers. We have one up in North Arkansas in Eureka Springs, who told me when he was trying to site his brewery that he looked at several locations and ultimately decided on one inside the city because one, he wouldn't have to filter he didn't want to be on a well. He didn't want to have to filter the water. That would add to the cost of his product. It would change the taste of his product, which was very important to him. And then right here in Central Arkansas, Diamond Bear Brewing, when they moved from Little Rock to North Little Rock, one of their main concerns was that their water source be Lake Winona. And I know that was a big, it was very important to him. It was Russ Melton, and that was something he considered when he was choosing a location for his brewery. So, brewers have so many decisions to make, on where to place their brewery that, and they're often limited by things like, the ability to sell alcohol and where they can build a facility. But water is in the top 5 things that they make decisions based on. When I surveyed most of my brewers, it was in the top 5 considerations. So.
Very good. So Tad, let me ask you now, you just heard from Sylvia about these breweries and the water supply being so important, the water quality. I'm going to speak a little bit on behalf of CAW because you can see their logo on my background there. I obviously work for the company and very proud of that. But CAW, she mentioned Lake Winona. We have two lakes that supply our system, Lake Winona and Lake Maumelle. Both are some of the highest quality water sources in the country. When you talk about regionalism and you talk about the idea of we have these great sources and we have an abundant supply of water that can be shared across much more of a service area than even what we cover now. How do you see regionalism, Tad, as being so important to the future of the growth of businesses in the state, the growth of the community in the state, and drawing in some of maybe these breweries that are looking for that really high quality water to make their product?
Well, I'll attack that on that question from three different sides. One is water quality in and of itself. And that's one thing that's really critical, important. And you have beautiful Lake Maumelle there behind you in that picture, and mine's from a different angle. But I think it's important to realize that the water quality is there because of a reason, and that's all those trees around it. And as community grow, and as people go, there's a lot of pressure that comes that people say, well, I want that view. I want to build a house so I can have that view. And they say, oh, my little house isn't going to make a difference. Well, one house may not, but thousands of houses would. So one of the things is it takes the entire community working together to say, we want the high quality water and we're willing to protect the water. And, to say it another way, don't be selfish and want that view to the detriment of the community. And that's one thing that's really important. We get lucky with Lake Maumelle because it's with Lake Winona, because it's surrounded by a national forest for the most part. And what's not in the national forest, we own. So, it's very isolated and very protected. It's also a deeper lake so that it gets it. The other thing I want to go back around to on the regional side of them that Melissa raised was this idea of local control. And it's amazing from an economic development side, from a business side, it's pretty clear that the businesses want stable and reliable and low cost. They want a stable water supply. They want a reliable water supply. Stable, I'm talking about quality, reliable, that it's going to get there, and low cost so that it's not an extra expense on their operations. And when the debate about delivery of water is limited at that level, it is clear that regionalism is a outstanding opportunity to be able to meet the needs of the business community. And it's when they want to talk about other things such as, local control, who's going to set rates, who's going to do these things that other things go to, that regionalism starts to blow up. And, businesses just want to know that they're going to have the products they need, when they need it, and that it's going to be available at a cost they can afford when they get it. And so that's one of the things that comes back around there. So did I answer your question, Doug?
I think you did.
Okay.
It's good though. It's all good information. So I appreciate you sharing that. Melissa, when we talk about regionalism and regional water utilities, obviously in your role and your day job, working with Raftelis and working specifically consulting a lot with the prospect of a utility moving to a more regional approach. Tell me where you're seeing potentially businesses or utilities that are following a regional model, maybe finding more success versus the old school approach of water utilities and all of the political boundaries and this, multiple utilities around. Tell us where you're seeing success with the regional approach.
Yeah. So that, I think this is definitely a trend that's here to stay, Doug. And part of it is, it can be as simple as I mentioned shared services. So it's utilities that are literally sharing employees across connections so that we're not duplicating the number of people doing billing, or there's one utility that's doing the billing system for 9 other utilities so that we don't have 10 different billing systems. Those kind of efficiencies that make a lot of sense to business leaders, right? But it could be as also larger, right? coming together to talk about regional water supply projects, or coming together to finance a water treatment plant. So we don't have 3 water treatment plants, we have one that can handle all of the water in the community. That's a lot more resilient. It has infrastructure that is updated, the quality is better. You know, if you can pool that and move forward. And then, you know, all the way to the other end of the spectrum is utilities that have said, you know, we need to merge. You know, think about it in business terms. I mean, it's a little bit different than an acquisition, perhaps, but it's merging those systems and all of the employees and capital that come with that to be more efficient. And a lot of this is what Tad said. We want to reduce the cost to consumer and be more reliable and resilient in a time when, look, climate change and all of the challenges that we've got happening. We need to be paying attention to have our best of our best there. So we're definitely seeing trends in that. I think we'll continue to see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Here at CAW, we've been pretty successful over the last few years with some regional approaches to things, specifically for those who are local, the city of Maumelle, which is just on the northwest side of Little Rock and North Little Rock. That merged with Central Arkansas Water about 5 years ago. And it had a lot to do with their aging infrastructure and some of the problems they were having in their system. And then those problems compounding to the point where they were having trouble keeping up. And that all of a sudden the dollars and cents got involved, and managing that system and keeping up with their infrastructure, it became unmanageable. They just simply couldn't afford to do it. And so we were able to do a study, come in, take a look at it. And that study came back and said, you know, Central Arkansas Water would be a good fit to come in and start running the water system within this city. So that kind of leads to the question. I'll start out with Sylvia, but let's kind of shift a little bit to infrastructure and talk about that and why it can be so important to the entire topic of this conversation today. You know, when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about pipes in the ground, water tanks, water treatment plants, all of those different things that make a municipal water system. From your perspective, Sylvia, though, from the business perspective, I'm sorry, I'm going to segue a second. Mimi put on the chat, you know, water source is critical to breweries. Location and taste is important. That is absolutely the truth. So with that said, how important from a brewer's perspective is the water quality, and you know, how do you maybe see problems with infrastructure creating problems for the completion of their product?
Well, that's a multi-part question, but reliability is key. The majority of our breweries in the state of Arkansas are very small businesses. We only have 2 or 3 breweries that are considered larger, medium-sized breweries. Those breweries, I think 3, actually have on-site water reservoirs. So if the water system were to go down, if their water supply were to be cut off for any amount of time, they could continue brewing. So of the 40, we have 42 breweries in the state of Arkansas. Only 3 have the ability to continue working if water is interrupted. And so that's a key component, that it would shut them down for the day or more. So moving on to you mentioned the taste and the water quality. One of the things that I heard from breweries across the state, but particularly here in Central Arkansas, is they use the word pure for the water. Not necessarily clean or clear. They use the word pure. And from their standpoint, that means the water is, for them, it's a blank slate. It's something that is easy to create flavor profiles with. They don't have to treat it, pre-treat it a lot to get it back to a blank slate in order to build flavor profiles. It creates a clean, crisp, and clear lager or Pilsner. So the lighter beers, it's really perfect for those. And then for the beers that are more complex, it's very easy for them to make the adjustments that they need to the water to get the flavor profiles they're looking for. So our water system is absolutely key. I need to look at I don't have off the top of my head. I wanted to give you these numbers so you could understand just how important water is to our industry. In the state of Arkansas, our breweries in 2019, we haven't compiled 2020 just yet, but in 2019, we produced over 46,000 barrels of beer. According to the Brewers Association, it depends on your process and the size of your brewery, but a gallon of beer, a barrel of beer is 31.5 gallons of beer. And we produced over 46,000 barrels of beer, meaning we used, or at minimum, we used over 1,500,000 gallons of water producing beer in the state of Arkansas. So just to give you an idea of just how important it is. And that's at minimum. We probably used a lot more than that in our cleaning processes and all. So.
Absolutely.
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, thank you for using that 1 million gallons of water, Sylvia. Appreciate it very much.
Actually, let me actually correct myself. So if a barrel is 31 gallons of beer, that means we actually used over 5,800,000 gallons of water in the state of Arkansas.
There you go.
I needed to correct my math on that. Yeah.
That's outstanding. You know, I want to follow up with this blank slate thing because when you were first talking about Pure, it harkened back to some conversations that I had with some brewers at times, and that the blank slate terminology is terminology that they had even used, and they reference it to we're artists, we're craftsmen brewing beer, and it's like a blank canvas for an artist versus having a canvas that's already got something on it. So you have to cover it up first or clean it first before you can start
filter it out.
Before you can start painting. And that's part of what they were really excited about. And we focused on breweries, but in our modern technology environment, it's also amazing to me how much that is a factor in not just in foods or beverages, but also just in like electronics production. Or think about your baby wipes, or you're not going to taste that, but they use a ton of water in that type of industry, and they want to know what's in that bucket, with those baby wipes, so that if a child sticks it in their mouth, or if it's going to be on the shelf for a while, that they have high outstanding quality control, and the water being as blank a slate as possible when it's delivered into the manufacturing facility really makes a difference in their manufacturing processes. And the one that always gets me, and I'm looking around on my desk, but the little yellow lines on the end of your phone charger, okay, that stick in the blade, that stick into the phone to charge your phone, whatever that's called. I'm not an electronics person, but that there's a water element of that manufacturing, and that water has to be very, very clear and very pure as to what you're talking about. So that quality of water extends way beyond just food sources and goes into so many areas of what our production and what drives our economy these days.
Yes, thank you. And a couple of points I wanted to make that came out of that conversation there. And I'm sorry, Melissa, I didn't see if you had anything to add before I jumped in.
Keep going. It's
okay. Sorry about that. We talked about the purity of the water, and something I failed to mention when I mentioned infrastructure is actually green infrastructure. And Tad kind of alluded to it earlier on as part of the conversation, the trees around the lake and the work that's done in the watershed to ensure its protection. As he mentioned, we have the 2 watersheds that we protect, but Lake Maumelle would be the highest risk of those just because of its location and proximity to the city and the potential for development there and the ability for folks to actually buy land around that lake. We do our very best to protect that and purchase strategic pieces of land, but that's another level of infrastructure that we're talking about here to try to, again, maintain the purity of that water before it ever hits the pipe and comes to the water treatment plant straight from that lake. And then that allows us in our efforts to be low cost to to use maybe less chemical, be more efficient with our processes, because the source of water is so good before it ever gets to the treatment plant that it requires less treatment, and that benefits all customers. So still back in the infrastructure realm here, Melissa, tell me a little bit, if you would, about how you see infrastructure across the country. And I think it's safe to say that utilities across the country are dealing with high risks as it relates to infrastructure, not just the green infrastructure and the potential for development, but just the age of pipe in the ground, and how it continues to get older. So talk a little bit about, from your experience, about what you're seeing as far as infrastructure goes.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, investment in infrastructure just seems like something that would be so simple to do. We all say, yeah, we should absolutely do that. And it's sad that we haven't been able to move that forward in our country as well as we could. But just, I wanted to share a few statistics on what water infrastructure means in the broader economy. We're a jobs multiplier in the water industry. For every job that Central Arkansas Water hires for, 3.68 jobs are created in the broader economy. So we're a jobs driver. Also, we talked a little bit about manufacturing. 46% of the water consumed in the US is to produce manufacturing products. It's not you drinking water at your house. That's like less than 1%, all right? So Tad and Doug are creating some really amazing pure water that Sylvia's folks can use to manufacture beer. And we're all grateful that we can consume that product, but really the manufacturing products are huge, and that's a big economic driver. And then on top of that, there's a $1 to $6 ratio. So every dollar spent on infrastructure, water infrastructure improvements, generates $6 in return. So, whether you're a Central Arkansas Water customer or any other utility, I know they're talking to you about infrastructure investment, because simply the pipes in the ground, the pump stations, the treatment plants are getting really old in our country, and we've got to start investing, and it's expensive. But just know, once we do that, the return comes back to the community.
I'm going to chime in on the end of that, if you don't mind, Melissa. And I think part of the things that's really important is that we work to change the dialogue from a cost to an investment. That, so many people think, well, what's it going to cost us to replace that pipe? And we really need to change the mindset of, what are we going to invest in that pipe because of the return, the longevity of it and the long-term return and the economic growth that comes about of it. And so, people don't want to pay a cost, but if you tell them they get to make an investment, it makes sense.
Well, let me chime in here then, Tad. If you're talking about an investment, there obviously needs to be a return on that investment. So what level of return would be necessary to a community for the amount of investment necessary to upgrade a lot of this aging infrastructure?
Well, if you look at it, and part of that has to do with efficiencies, and part of that has to do with the customer base, of how broad your customer base is. But when you're looking at the return of investment, and Melissa already gave you the number of $1 is $1 investment in pipe is a $6 investment to the return. I think another way that you can look at it is for, every dollar that you spend on infrastructure, when we've looked at it, you're somewhere between 95 to 97% of that dollar spent is going to stay right in the community. It's going to go back into the businesses that provide the services so that you can spend those dollars, and it's going to go back into jobs. It's going to go back into wages. It's going to go back into the community. So, people have a tendency to look at and say, okay, if I give money to this charity, for instance, how much of that is going to actually go to do the service for what I'm, feeding the poor or whatever your service is, and how much of it's going to go to administration. And when you look at dollar investment in infrastructure, you get that same kind of very high percentage of return, that 95 to 97% of it is going right back in to the community and providing value to the community. So, the return there is there. It's there. The other thing that people have to remember is, that we're gonna pay for infrastructure over one period of time, but that infrastructure's life is gonna probably be 3x. You know, if we're gonna replace a pipe, you know, and we're gonna finance it with a capital improvement bond, we're gonna pay for that infrastructure over a 30-year debt service. You know, but that pipe is gonna last 100 years. You know, and so you got a much longer return into what you're putting in there, and so it's not just an investment in the economy today, but it's also an investment for the next generation.
You know, I wish I would get that type of return. You know, when you buy a vehicle now, you pay for it for 5 years. You don't get 3x on those generally.
No.
That's a really valid point. I appreciate that, Ted. So I got a couple of blanket questions I just want to throw out to all the panelists, and then we can just kind of toss them around, and whoever wants to step up first. We obviously have someone from the utility here. We have someone representing business here, and then we have someone who kind of sees water, maybe even across the country from a little different perspective, because they've seen the challenges that different communities face. So my question is, how do you believe, whoever wants to start, that an organization like CAW can spur economic growth in a community? Go.
Well, I just, if that's okay. You know, I think one of the things that CAW has been doing, and that we'd like to see more utilities do, is talk about the value that they bring to the community. And you know, we're lucky here that you've been doing that. But what I see when I work across the country is a lot of folks that just don't talk about water in their constituencies and community are really unaware of even where their water comes from, or what their watershed is, of the importance of protecting that watershed. So keeping up the drumbeat and connecting very cleanly on your economic development plans in your community. You know, where is that water supply coming from? What are the talking points that we can bring when we're trying to bring businesses into the community? And this whole idea of regionalization, I think, is really critical. You know, we realized a long time ago that people don't just live and work in the same block. Well, maybe right now we are with COVID. But in normal times, we're out and about and we're in a larger community, and that talking about water and its importance to our everyday life and how essential that is really critical.
Right, and I think Central Arkansas Water, particularly when it comes to the breweries, has been reaching out, has been helping us reach out to the community to talk about how important our water source is, and I think more of that.
Yeah, I would say that, and this pairs off of both of those things. One, for decades, the industry as a whole was, as long as nobody's complaining, we're fine. You know, we don't want our name in the paper. We don't want any articles about what we do. We just want people to turn on their tap and it work, or they flush their toilet and it work. And as long as that's happening, everything's good. And I think that has had to change and will continue to change, because the public, one, wants more information about what's going on, but also as demands have, and rumors of contaminants and various other things have risen, we have to be more engaged in education. The other part of it is that we can't operate in an island or as a silo, in that, and for instance, when we were going to do some work on the Ozark treatment plant, which is the plant that most of the water that goes to the breweries that we have on our system comes through, you know, we were very proactive and got out and talked to them ahead of time and said, okay, we're going to shut down this plant on this day. Here, you're going to now get water from Lake Maumelle. Here are the very down to parts per thousand type thing. Here are the differences in the water that's going to be coming in, so that they could plan their productions and that they could know what was going on. And, you know, we don't normally think of water as a supply chain element in historically that, oh, by the way, we need to talk to all of our customers and let them know that we're going to tweak the formula in the supply chain for their products. And it's having that discussion. It's making sure that you're out there and being part of, allowing them to be part of your discussion. And so that, hey, this is going to have an impact on us. Is there something else you could do? Is there another way you could look at it? Could we do something else? Or, okay, if you've got to do that, can you help us figure out what we're going to have to do on the back end to adjust our processes? So I think there's that interaction that has to start happening between the businesses and the suppliers, other than just, are you going to turn on your water and your water's there? And so I think that it raises the dialogue to a whole new level that hasn't existed in the past 100 years of water supply in this country. And so how do we do that? And how do we move forward with that?
All right, perfect. That's great. I think, well, we got about 10 minutes. I want to certainly leave time for questions and answers, but I did just want to give our panelists maybe one final opportunity here to share some final thoughts. We've obviously covered a pretty good amount of ground today, but I think mainly the real focus and the talking points that came out of today are the importance of regionalism and of regionalization as it relates to water. A number that didn't get out earlier that I wanted to throw out just for everyone's knowledge, just talking about Arkansas alone. We have 75 counties in Arkansas. There are close to 750 separate water suppliers in the state of Arkansas. And so when you think about that, I know some of you, especially those who are local on the call, have read the news and have seen where some of these very tiny little water systems have had their well collapse or something catastrophic happen. And then all of a sudden the entire community is without water for weeks, months, as they're trying to resolve it. And there's funding that has to be found to try to go and save the water supply of these little places. So I think what we've gleaned here is that the prospect of regional water and the prospect of, as Melissa alluded to earlier, mergers and coming together and partnering has become so important where we are now. Also, something else that I think we've gathered today is the importance of infrastructure and how it continues to age and how it's going to be important for the communities to buy in to replacing that infrastructure going forward. So I think that, to me, those are the two really big points that came out today. And looking at it from a business perspective, a business like a brewery is going to need commitment on both of those fronts. Commitment to secure a strong water supply organization going forward for years, and to ensure that the water supply is continuous and of the highest quality possible going forward. So with those two things in mind, I would just ask for any final thoughts from any of our panelists to kind of share with the group today as maybe something they can take with them and maybe even promote on behalf of the water industry worldwide.
Well, I could start there, I guess. I think it's important that we always remember that, as a utility, CAW is here to serve the communities. And we need to hear from the community if there's things that we're not doing. It doesn't mean you have to trash us on Facebook or whatever, but it never hurts, to say, hey, pick up the phone and call and say, we need help with this, or this is a concern, or we're concerned about water quality. Will you come out and let us know about it? But the more we have the dialogue versus not talking about things or concerns that are going on. For a while, there was a lot of people that were concerned about Flint, and they said, well, if Flint's got bad water, we must have bad water too. And it becomes let's talk about it. Let's not, sweep it under the rug. Let's not hide it underneath the mattress. If we have concerns, if we have issues that need to go with water supply and water quality, let's have dialogue about them and let's talk about them so that everybody has confidence in what we're doing and confidence in their water supply. The fact that we have outstanding water and people still buy bottled water is concerning. I mean, it's an environmental concern, but it's also just a trust concern. We have some outstanding, consistently rated some of the best water available, yet there are people that still say, I'm sorry, I don't ever want to drink tap. I'm gonna buy bottled water. Now, if it's bottled beer, I get it. I mean, that's different. But if they're just buying bottled water, which may be bottled at a plant right down the road from off the municipal system, we need to change that dialogue, and we need to make sure that the entire community has faith and trust and believes that they're getting a reliable product there, and make sure they understand that.
And I think for business, particularly, I can speak only for breweries, but I think one of the things that we can do is to promote our partnerships with our municipal water sources and talk openly about the importance of the quality of the water as an ingredient in our beer. We often talk about the hops, we talk about the barley, we talk about sourcing, and I think a lot of times water is easy to leave out of the equation because it's simply ubiquitous. So I think that's important for us to remember to do as an industry.
Yeah, and just both great points by Sylvia and Tad. But I want to make sure that folks take away that the message Tad had, that utilities really do want to be involved and integrated into your community. And so if you're making decisions on land use planning or new businesses or bringing things, you have experts right down the road who would love to be involved in that discussion as well. And just leaving you with the thought that there is a lot of value to the product that our water utilities nationally are providing, and it's a product that there's probably very little that is more, lack of a better word, intimate, right? I mean, this is a product that those of you that are parents, when you came home with that little baby, you bathed your child in this water. It's you gave it to your kid to drink. So it's, there is nothing that water utilities are ever going to do that would be harmful, on purpose or intentional. And so Tad's point about the bottled water, it's a little point of contention for us that are involved in tap water production, but really such incredible value in the product that we produce, and really appreciate all of the business leaders here joining us today to learn more about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. That's wonderful. I appreciate all of our panelists. I did want to offer up any opportunity for a quick question for the panelists. Did anyone in the group have a question they wanted to ask? Okay, not hearing any at this point. Again, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Tad. Really enlightening discussion today. I know that you are all very passionate about water and about your industry, and we're grateful for that here at Central Arkansas Water and across the community. We're going to continue to do everything we can to provide each one of you with the best water we possibly can every given day. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Ashley, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Doug, on moderating this panel. Awesome job. And again, thanks to all of our panelists, Tad, Sylvia, Melissa. This was a very interesting conversation. I think it's one that not a lot of people consider. When you think about water, it's accessible, it's there, it's readily available. And so it's not something that's considered, but boy, if it ever stopped, it's definitely a point of contention for everybody. It's, mass hysteria, right? So that's why this conversation is extremely important to talk about this and provide a little bit more insight on this topic. So thanks again to everybody. One last thank you to our sponsors, Frost, PLLC, Entergy, Simmons Bank, the Little Rock Regional Chamber, Wright Lindsay Jennings, and of course, Central Arkansas Water, our newest sponsor of Lift the Rock. Thanks again. As I mentioned earlier, there are other programs that we offer, so be sure to check out those. If you're interested, go ahead and register, and we hope to see you all again soon. Have a great Friday, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Sylvia. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. You guys did a great job. Learned a lot about water